I'm Zoey Toner from Ashland High School Teen Press and interviewing Nisha Burton, the filmmaker of Hurricane with Fire.
I'm Payshens Cinchy. I'm with Team Press from the Ashland Middle School.
What changes would you like to see with the rebuilding process starting and continuing?
Well, I think that a hopeful thing is that it seems like a lot of voices and a lot of strong voices that are advocating for a lot of good things are involved in the process. And like in my film as explored by Neria Alicia, who's been a longtime friend and a great advocate in the area for the Latinx community here, she talks a lot about how affected that particular community was by these fires and how it is a relatively exploited community within our Southern Oregon area. And so to rebuild with that community in mind, and really put that at the front of the conversation rather than an afterthought. So I hope that that continues to be the case, that, interests of people that maybe have more financial, means or are able to rebuild don't get prioritized over people who perhaps put their life savings into their home or to their mobile home and then had that all taken away and maybe don't even have as many insurance opportunities to rebuild. I hope that those people can be supported and can be really put at the front of the conversation as we're continuing to rebuild.
Fire season in Southern Oregon have grown larger and longer over the past 30 years. How do you feel about climate change? How can people have an impact for the good?
That's a great question. And I think it's true that, part of the conversation around the fires has to address climate change because like I had mentioned earlier, I grew up in Southern Oregon, and really just these past 4 or 5 years is when the fires have been getting so extreme and so devastating. And so I can see that it's not been the norm of Southern Oregon to have these large fires and to have all of this smoke during the summer and all of that. So there's a clear marker that something has been changing. And so that's why within my film, obviously I'm focusing in on the particular incident of the fires that happened here and the homes and people that were affected by those. But the bigger conversation is in relation to climate change and what we can do as a community and as a global community to address that. Because like Neria said in the film, it's our particular in Southern Oregon manifestation of climate change so far has been the fires, but anywhere you go, you're going to see the effects of it just in varied ways, from hurricanes to tornadoes to all of these things. And so we hopefully can all come together and really make this a priority, because when it does affect us in such a close way, it takes it from this abstract place of like, oh, climate change is happening and that's bad, to a very personal level of, my home or my friend's home was destroyed because of this, and people were put in danger because of the conditions being different than they have in the past. So I hope that, I don't have a solution for it all, but I hope it can be a wake-up call for people to really prioritize addressing climate change and the issues that we're faced with currently.
This fire spread so quickly. Do you feel like emergency crews did a good job? Could anything have been done differently?
I think that's a really good question too. Like I said, I was there the day after the fire. I was actually on the Oregon coast the day of the fire, so I wasn't up close and personal to it the day that it happened. But with interviewing people and speaking to a lot of people that were on the ground, a big piece of what happened, it seems, from what I've heard, is just how quickly the winds were moving, and how dry it was. And so that propelled the fire in a much quicker way than ever before. And that's one of the reasons why I named the film what I did, A Hurricane with Fire, because one of my interviewees she said that that's what it felt like because of the winds moving, I think it was 40 miles per hour, and how they were able to really carry that. So I think that did make a really difficult situation for firefighters and first responders, being able to manage what was burning. And in the interview that I did with Bo, who was on the ground biking around during the fires, from his perspective and what he said, he saw them doing the best they could at trying to manage the fire. But he said it was a tricky situation because it was spreading so rapidly. And so a lot of times what he saw was that they were trying to manage the damage and take care of spaces that maybe still had an opportunity to be saved, but there were places and homes that they had to, kind of give up on, in a sense, because it was moving so quickly and they wanted to contain it as best they could. So I don't know completely the situation. I think one of the elements that people were frustrated with was the lack of information as far as emergency alerts go. I heard that from pretty much all of my interviewees across the board. So hopefully that system could be improved upon, because, I was, like I said, out on the coast, and I got several notifications of the conditions being so temperamental with the strong hot winds that were coming from the east, I believe. And so maybe if there were more notifications for people, they would have at least had an opportunity to gather their stuff or to get out quicker or whatever. But I think as far as the firefighters go, they probably did what they could. And it was just such a large, bigger than we've ever seen in my history of living in Southern Oregon, incident of the fires taking over the town. So I think it's complex.
Yeah, with that communication thing, even here in Ashland where we weren't around the fires, we would get the notifications also. Obviously we didn't get like the you need to evacuate, but like, have things ready by your door, have things in your car. We got those ones that we never actually had to carry through because we were far enough like in Ashland. Mm-hmm. But yeah, but the people that were actually harmed by the fire, their houses burnt down, they didn't have like any time. They had like 3 minutes and they had to get out.
Yeah. I heard so many stories like that of people that were really caught off guard by it.
Yeah, definitely. I live in Talent, and I'm in an apartment complex, and we didn't actually go because of the alerts. We left because people we knew were like, you have to get out. Once you get an alert, there's no time to get anything. So get things and then go, because just in case. And then we were really worried about our house because we didn't think it was still still there, because a lot of people had said that it was gone. And then we came back and it was still here, luckily. But we talked to the maintenance crew of the entire complex, and they saved it. Like, the firefighters had to move to the front of the fire to stop it, and it was just spreading like widely, and they like ran all around the complex saving the complex. It's just like such a surreal experience.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that is. I'm glad that your complex was spared. And it's true. That's what I heard, that in some instances it was down to either like maintenance crew or homeowners coming back and fighting back the fire from their homes themselves. And so that's a really, intense, scary situation, but I'm glad some places were able to be spared.
Yeah, and I think that's why people like Bo really had a big impact, because they were going around telling people like, this house is gone, but this one is still okay. And then their neighbors or their family or they themselves came back to try and like keep it that way.
Mm-hmm. Totally. I know when he shared that one particular story, which I included in the film, I just thought that was such a poignant example of how people on the ground really in that situation did help to save homes and help to, make it a little less devastating for some individuals. So yeah, thankful for what he did and getting to hear that story and that experience.
Do you think that the community has been changed forever? And do you think that a lot of the people who were low income are going to have to stay out of the Rogue Valley for a long time to come.
I think that's definitely one of the major concerns in our area. I mean, we already had such an issue with the housing availability and the price of housing increasing in such a radical, quick pace, where before renting a home in Southern Oregon was not a big challenge. Now it's become a challenge for many people, especially the low income community. And then having Talent and Phoenix be the main places that were affected, and those also being the places where a lot of the affordable housing was available, is a huge issue. And so I think that, through the film, through the interviews, and through talking to community members, that's something that people are concerned about and want to make sure that there is affordable housing that gets built in place of what was burned down, rather than, if people just took advantage of that spaces were cleared to then erect really expensive housing. So I think, I hope not. I hope that there's enough people that have the mindset of wanting to help continue having our community be available to all people, regardless of their income levels. But I think that's definitely something we have to consider in the years that follow in the rebuilding process.
So our next question is, while interviewing people for the film, did you feel like a sense of hope at all?
So with the interviewees, I would ask them what their fears were as well as what their hopes were for the future. And I think out of that did come a lot of hopeful visions of how we can rebuild in even better ways. And so that was very inspiring to me to see that, especially from people who had lost their homes, who had lost so much. And at the same time, especially with the people that had lost their homes, it was still a bit of being in the shock of the experience and in being in the aftermath of it all and everything that they had to deal with insurance companies and trying to figure out what they were doing next. And so, yeah, it's a complex thing. I think there was hope, but I think it's tempered by also the reality of the gravity of the situation and how huge it is to rebuild two towns.
I was walking past these two trees yesterday, and they were like, before spring hit, they looked really burnt to like a crisp, like they didn't look survivable. But then I was walking past them the other day, and like a couple of the branches were blooming flowers, like pink and white flowers, and it was just like a really kind of like shocking picture, this like burnt tree with like one or two limbs blooming. And I just thought, I don't know if that's happening in Ashland, but I thought it was really interesting. And I'm really close to the Southern Oregon community too, and so I just thought it might be an interesting little piece of information that you might want to know or like tell people, because it really kind of brought back a little bit of hope for me, because I was like, oh, we can survive this, like the environment can survive this. That's
really why I ended the film with the image, the beautiful mural of the woman that's with the phoenix, rising from the ashes, and then also the flowers and the messages of hope that people put everywhere. And it's really true. I mean, I really, dealing with all the complexities of the hardness, I do believe that we are going to rebuild in a great and beautiful way. And I do believe just seeing nature, how it is coming back, like you're talking about, even from being burned, what seems like to a crisp, but then how the trees actually are thriving and all the grass too, and how green it is just, I think, a great symbol of that we can rebuild together and that we are going to come back as a community, even more beautiful and more strong, I hope. And I think a lot of people are holding that hope and vision. So,
in your opinion, what can be done to make sure this doesn't happen again?
I think that is a difficult question to answer, really, because there are factors that we don't necessarily have direct control over, as far as climate patterns and as far as drought levels and the weather, basically, and how just a little spark can ignite such a huge, devastating fire. So as far as all of that goes, it is challenging, but at the same time, I think that there are ways that we can rebuild, knowing that the possibility of more fires is a very big possibility. And so making sure that we do everything we can to rebuild homes that are very fire safe and fire resistant. And then also just having systems in place to deal with if there are large fires that are happening in residential areas, to again, like, notify people, to make sure that firefighters are aware that that is a big possibility in this area going forward, and to inform community members about how to be ready to go, I think, afterwards, I heard a lot of people across the board say that they had a bag packed and ready to go because they knew it was a possibility that another one could happen. And so I think that going forward, we all are going to be a lot more aware in Southern Oregon during especially the fire season, that you need to be ready to leave if you have to. But then, also with the rebuilding, I think that in a way of making sure this doesn't happen again, a really great part of what I saw is how much the community did come together and how kind people were to each other. And so I think continuing to fortify our community so that we're prepared to deal with these things, as well as we're doing as much as we can to prevent fires like this from happening again. So it's a big question. I know a lot of really smart people are thinking on it, and I do have a lot of faith in what they're going to be able to come up with for the future. But I think we all now are a little bit more wary when it comes around to summer, and especially, the hot months in August and now September too. Like, this is a real possibility that we might be living with for years to come.
Was it difficult to find all of your interviewees? Were people reluctant to take interviews?
Yeah, it was challenging in some ways, especially for myself, being very close to the situation and also wanting to be very sensitive to people, especially those that had lost their homes. I definitely always made it really clear that no one was at all obligated to be filmed, and any questions I asked too, if it was too personal or they didn't want to answer, I erred on the side of being extra sensitive to the situation, especially being so close to it and being relatively close to many of my interviewees. And I am thankful for how it all turned out. It feels like I knew that I would, in one way, just put the call out there. Like on Facebook, I announced that I was doing this film, and anybody that knew somebody or themselves wanted to be interviewed to contact me. So I put it out there. And then also I had a few people that I specifically reached out to because I either, knew them personally, knew that they had lost a home, or knew that they were big community organizers and helping to, deal with the efforts following the fires and helping to help the various communities that were affected. And so it was definitely easier to find and approach people that were helping and were supporting and were doing things, and they were very willing and ready to be interviewed, whereas people that had lost their homes, it was a little bit more of a struggle, both because they were very much in it, they were directly affected, and also in the reaching out to people, I didn't want to be pushy or demanding that they be in this film because they're dealing with so much more. And so I knew that it was a delicate dance. But I'm very happy with everybody that was willing to be interviewed, and all of my interviewees. I could have made, a 10-hour film because they just said such amazing things. Yeah, thank you all for interviewing me. It was really fun.